Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
You guys see that father-daughter duo that's been going to Leafs games and their season ticket holders just wearing the jerseys of opposing teams?
I did see that.
My heroes.
I have never been so inspired to be a father in the future. Like, that is elite level hater attitude. That is what we should all aspire to. That is the perfect encapsulation of hockey fans all rallying together across 31 franchises to just dunk on the Leafs. That's what it's all about. That's quality time with your kids.
I mean, for how much they paid for those tickets, they have every right to be as angry as they are and cheer against the Leafs.
Well, something tells me that it's money's not a problem for them if they have those tickets and the jerseys. And those are like, they're updated jerseys too. I see the Tampa Bay special edition. I see the Florida reverse retro. Like, they're up to date with their hate.
Yeah, they're all in. No expense was wasted on their trolling of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yes, they're Habs fans, but they're honorary every Leafs arrival fans today. Good for them. And good job, Adam Lascaris, friend of the podcast, for doing the investigation and writing the article for Daily Hive. We should have Adam back on one day. We should remove his ban from the Winged Wheel podcast. All right. Well, lots has happened since the last episode of the podcast. Let's jump right into it. Welcome to the Winged Wheel podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, the playoffs, and a special interview today with Ken Daniels. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast, like I mentioned, lots has happened. We are going to be talking about an update with Simon Edvinsson. He had shoulder surgery, so we'll talk about what his timeline is and what that means for other Red Wings prospects. The Tyler Bertuzzi question has come back up, and probably worth addressing now that Boston season is over, which we will talk about later on. We caught up with Ken Daniels as the offseason kicked off for him, and he gives us his thoughts on the Red Wings season, what's upcoming for them, the playoffs, and lots more. And we'll get into whatever else we can fit in before overtime, the playoffs, maybe a little bit of what's going on in Calgary, and plenty more. Before all that, I want to let you know that this podcast is essentially completely supported by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Your support allows us to do things like grow the show, constantly improve, maintenance, upkeep, things like that, but also our support of the Jamie Daniels Foundation through Wings Money on the Board and other initiatives. Are hosting Winged Wheel podcast nights at the LCA in partnership with the Detroit Red Wings, expanding the Winged Wheel podcast content network with the first new show, which is Expected by Whom, hosted by Prashant Iyer and Sean Shapiro. All of that is supported by our patrons. And if you do support, you get benefits like our Patreon exclusive bonus episodes, which we have been told are funnier and better than the main episodes. You are given access to the Patreon exclusive Discord community, and also are entered automatically into all of our giveaways. We gave away 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game this past season, the vast majority going directly to patrons. So patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you're able and want to support the show, we really, really, really appreciate it. Simon Edvinsson news caught me kind of off guard, yeah?
Yeah.
He was kind of fighting something the whole last little bit of the year. So I don't think it's a surprise that he was hurt. 4 to 6 month recovery was a touch surprising considering he was playing through it.
Yes. I agree with you that he was playing through it. I wonder how long he's been playing through it too, because I know his shoulder had nagged him at different points over the last year, really, like even in international play. So I wonder if this was a thing where, he wanted to play through it and thought, let's just try to recover without. And we just went through this with Jacob Vrana a couple of years ago. So some PTSD there, but I think you're right. You could see it, Brad, at the end of his 9 games with the Red Wings at the end of last season. It must have just been, you're up at NHL speed, NHL pace, that kind of physicality, and then for sure, this needs worked on. Or they could have decided even earlier in the year, but thought I can just play through the rest of the season before taking that long of a recovery time.
This is my guess, just knowing typical hockey player mentality. This is probably Simon saying, this is my year to establish myself. I'm not taking time off. And just kind of played through it. And obviously, I'm sure the team was aware of whatever was going on. And, if he wasn't at risk of making it worse, they would let him play through it if it was a pain management thing.
Mm-hmm.
To which anytime it's a pain management thing, the player's going to play. You know how dumb hockey players are, though we love them for it.
It makes the game great, but
yeah. So I'm guessing that he had a good season in the AHL, had a good 9-game stint with Detroit, felt very comfortable with where where his spot in the organization is now. And the team's like, all right, what do we want to do? He probably went, okay, fix it.
4 to 6 months is, I have to say, this isn't a great piece of news for the Red Wings. Obviously, there's no 4 to 6 month surgery that will be good for any player, but Simon Edvinsson's at the age where, yeah, you can display the skill and the talent and your hockey IQ and what have you, but the physicality, the skating strength, the speed, all of that, it comes with a foundation of good offseason work. It's almost like a meme now, like this player needs to bulk up and get stronger in the offseason, like go live with Gary Roberts and do his regimen, whatever it is. But it's a joke for a reason, like it's true. And filling out frames, building NHL level strength. If you're a guy that size, leveraging that to your advantage, which is, look at Michael Rasmussen pre the glorification of him, when that was actually a big disadvantage for him. And he obviously got a lot stronger during an offseason, and now his game has completely changed. You want something similar for pretty much anyone of that frame. Edvinsson needed this offseason to do a lot of that work. And not to say he can't do anything, but 4 to 6 months means he's either ready just in time for, camp, preseason, whatever, or he's only going to be healthy after the season starts a few weeks later, depending on how the timeline goes. And then he's playing catch up. So he's not even just shaking off the rust and getting up to game speed. This is a really, really, really important year for building yourself physically. It's not going to be a lost year and he's going to be catching up for the rest of his career, but it's going to be more of a grind than what he would have wanted. Before this, we would have said, yeah, he's very likely on the opening night roster based on how he performed his 9 games. And not that he doesn't have to earn it, but he shouldn't have any trouble finding that spot. And now that's a big question mark depending on how he comes off the recovery process.
Yeah, I guess it depends how much training he can do, because if it was like a 4 to 6 month lower body, you're screwed. You can't do any cardio. You're going to be coming in cold. So it'll be interesting to see when he'll be cleared to start actually skating and doing some sort of training. But it opens the door for other guys.
Oh, yeah. This, namely, Albert Johansson, William Wallinder. 2 guys who we've been saying, and a lot of people have been saying, don't discount them just because Edvinsson's coming in, and don't discount them just because the Red Wings have other NHL bodies on the roster. They can come into camp and make some noise. So what does this mean for their prospects for next season's Red Wings?
I don't think it means anybody's getting that spot automatically because, again, with the flexibility of Chiarot going from left side to right side, wherever they need him. But what it does open up is an opportunity for somebody to take it. One of Wallinder or Johansson's going to have an inside track to be that 6th, 7th guy to make the team out of camp, which if Edvinsson was there, I think we could all probably agree was a bit of a long shot for one of them to stick out of camp, at least, unless there was an injury or something. They both go in, one of them or both in a perfect world have a phenomenal camp preseason. Yeah, they're probably suiting up opening day at that point, which again, I would have given less than 5% odds on a healthy team that would have happened before the Edvinsson news broke.
Not the nicest thing in the world that Edvinsson is no longer in the running, or at least depending on how his recovery goes, it's a way bigger question mark. But yeah, like you said, Brad, it just opens the door for them, and it opens it wider, and it's good because you wouldn't want the issue of, you have middle pair NHL bodies or even bottom pair NHL bodies holding these spots where it doesn't make sense to kick him out of it, but Wallinder or Johansson don't have the opportunity to shine here. So those guys have an opportunity to kind of do what Elmer Soderblom did to a degree. If you come in and you impress, there's a spot for you. You just have to take it. And if they don't, that's okay. Like Grand Rapids obviously they're going to have to hire a new coach, and they're going to go through probably a transformative process based on how Sean Horkoff talked about that. But it's, you're not happy about the Edvinsson surgery. You're not happy about the injury, but there's other doors being opened here. One other thing I'll add, NHL teams almost to a fault over project, under promise, over deliver in terms of injury timelines. They really never like the injury to go further than what they publicly communicate. So I'm not saying Edvinsson's going to be ready in 3 months, but often with timelines like this, guys are skating and doing, full physical contact, full all-out training way before the 4 to 6 months timeline comes up. So this could be that situation, but you also have to avoid setbacks. Brad, you've had I don't know how many shoulder injuries. Did you? Yeah, you got it operated on?
No, I got very close to surgery, but we were able to rehab and avoid it.
Evan and I are going to push you into the door frame on the way downstairs to see if we can re-aggravate that.
Joke's on you. The time frame for surgery was 2 years. If I re-aggravated it in under 2 years, it was automatic surgery. We're over 3 years now, buddy.
Your body's not recovering the same way it used to.
Oh, we're gonna have to push you harder, is what I hear.
Yeah. Well, if I re-aggravate it, I might be able to avoid surgery still with more rehab. But either way, I did want to bring this up. So thank you for accidentally bringing it up for me. Where surgery is a little more definitive than rehab,
and he's young and made of rubber and has the best physical therapy in the world.
Because I rehabbed my shoulder, the last one, and my timelines were changing every week. So the fact that Edvinsson's getting surgery will definitely be more accurate, but you can't pinpoint shoulders just because there's so many moving parts, joints, muscles, ligaments going through there in a million different ways. So, Ryan was almost a doctor, so maybe he can get in a little more scientific terms for us here. But
no, I think it's he has a way better young athletes like him. Their outcomes are generally better for the obvious reasons.
Yeah,
they recover faster. They have the best medical training and medical staff in the world at their disposal. By all rights, this should, and they said it was successful. So by all rights, it should go well.
Yeah. So. Everything's on the table, but I would bet on the quicker versus the later, given everything you laid out.
All right, let's talk about one more thing before jumping in with Ken. The Boston Bruins, like I mentioned before, lost in a historic way. They're out, which means Tyler Bertuzzi is out of the playoffs. Had himself some kind of first round. 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 points, and just basically stamped what everyone knew would be on the page, which is this guy is a playoff player. I know there were talks about how the best players on Boston, including Bertuzzi, performed in the losses. Plus minus gets thrown around a lot, but still, Bertuzzi's price was raised after that. Now, something I'll say is based on what we know and my understanding, Steve Yzerman has said multiple times that there was a big disconnect between his and Bertuzzi's camp on contract, and it never really went very far, and the talks broke down well before he was traded. And based on my understanding, the crux of that, or the non-starter, was Bertuzzi wanted 7 years, I believe it was. 7 years, or maybe 7 years plus, but 7 years, not even to mention whatever dollar value he was asking for. And remember that this is Tyler Bertuzzi's biggest contract of his life. He's never going to make more money than he is on this next contract, so he should be asking for a lot. But the 7 years for the Red Wings, where they saw Bertuzzi miss a ton of time to injury and were wondering whether it would be worth spending all that money for all that time and what the risk of the drop-off would be, they were just never there. And so that's why Bertuzzi was traded. So now folks are wondering, they saw Bertuzzi do great. They saw him really crush it with Boston. Do you bring him back in the offseason now that he's an unrestricted free agent? Boston's going to have trouble retaining their players because they don't have a ton of cap space. Does Detroit do it? And my honest intuition here, and I'd never say never, and this isn't based on any intel, but just knowing what we know, his price went up. I just don't see how it would make sense for Detroit to do it now if they were out on him before.
I'll pose one simple question that should sum up most of this problem. Outside of we like the guy, what part of Tyler Bertuzzi as it stands right now would fit for the Detroit Red Wings long term?
Oh, I would love to have him on the team long term.
Again, we like the guy, but his age, contract demands.
It's just the contract.
Yeah, even age, because again, how far away are the Red Wings? We've talked about that at length, but he's closer to 30 than he is 25.
Okay, but we can't be talking about going out and getting, Connor or Ehlers or whatever, and not say getting Bertuzzi for no assets would be a hindrance to the timeline. Agree or disagree with what the timeline is?
No, but it's relevant because Kyle Connor has 3 years left on his contract. You can take a guy and not at around that age and not commit 7 years to him. And again, I'm with you. This is the biggest contract of Tyler Bertuzzi's career. And if I'm Tyler Bertuzzi, I am fighting for every last year and every last dollar on this contract. And I am not settling for a penny less because it's the time. And this playoff series was the best performance of his career. Everything lined up perfect for Tyler to get paid. And with all his injuries and how it played out in Detroit, that wasn't always in the cards for him. So from a Tyler Bertuzzi perspective, good for him, awesome for him. This worked out perfectly for his financial future. The Red Wings ain't giving him 7 years. If the Red Wings were going to, well, he would never have been a Bruin. And they would have got him for cheaper than they would be able to get him now. And if they were really set on it and they just couldn't quite negotiate the contract, they wouldn't have traded him because they'd have been close and they'd have just kept negotiating. So I'm not saying it's a 0% chance, but I'm going to say it's a sub 3% chance if I want to be generous.
Seems pretty unlikely to me as well. I mean, when you're not close on contract and the conversation has dissolved sooner rather than later, that just makes me think that neither party is really interested in what the other has to say. So, things do change. Perspective changes once you go to a new team and, your life has changed for X amount of time after the trade deadline. So you never know if there's comfort in returning. But if I'm Tyler Bertuzzi, you guys know me, I'm taking maximum dollar, maximum guaranteed money. I'm not taking a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. I don't even know if he'd take a 4-year deal. He's got to maximize the earnings. And I think there's going to be lots of teams who line up for his services.
You would have been the first one to take the Live Tour offer.
Yes. Yes.
I agree. For the record, we talked about it the other day. I agree with you. But also, because I'm a peon. I don't know. I don't even want to project.
I thought you were going to say I'm a golfer, and I was going to laugh very hard.
I am.
Yeah, you are. You definitely are.
I have a lot of fun, and I'm terrible. I think that I'm qualified.
That makes you a golfer.
I agree fully. I think the chance is about as low as it can be without it being 0, because you can't say definitely. But what's the number? What contract length would you take for Bertuzzi? Let's say he was interested in taking anything lower than 7, which he won't. But let's say he was. Would you take Bertuzzi on a 5-year deal? Because I think I would.
Yeah, I would.
But he won't.
What if his offers are only what if the total sum of the contracts are all about the same? In terms of dollars and times.
I think for a guy who just did 5 goals, 5 assists in his first 7 playoff games at the NHL level, he is going to be flooded with offers. I just think someone's going to overpay for him.
I do too.
Or pay the free agency premium for him.
That's why I said what if.
Yeah, that's fair. In that hypothetical, well, he would take the most dollars. He would just want the most dollars, period.
Yeah.
Whatever the total sum of the contract is, that's what he would take. I mean, if you're talking 5 years gets you $1 million less than 7 years, then that's when he'll probably make a different decision. But teams are going to go to 7 on him.
Yeah. Obviously, I don't think he's going to get max dollars and max term. That's just not how free agency ever works. Generally, you have to settle somewhere unless you're like an Artemi Panarin, John Tavares, Steven Stamkos level free agent. And obviously, teams are going to be aware of Bertuzzi's history, and there's some red flags there. But you're right. Teams are going to be tripping over themselves to get a playoff performer who's that gritty, physical Matthew Tkachuk light type of player, especially with Matthew Tkachuk going the way he's going right now. That type of player right now is going to be in high demand.
It could be Florida.
And you know what? That's how you get away from the max dollar, because of the low income tax or the no income tax state. And that, I'm sorry, Tyler Bertuzzi, as much as he's he made Michigan his second home, and as much as he looks like he belongs in Boston, that is a Florida man if I've ever seen one.
I was going to say, he looks like a Florida man, too.
Do either of those teams have any salary cap space, though? Tampa is going backwards this offseason.
Who knows? You know what? We say the cap is fake a lot, and it's more true in other sports, but we've seen teams will make moves if they need to. How much movement did we see last summer between Florida and Calgary, for example? Don't expect that every year, but the NHL is a copycat league, and as one team starts to set a trend, you're going to see it. And that the same thing applies. I'm glad you brought up Tkachuk. Tkachuk is going to be the poster boy, especially if Florida does this against Toronto and goes to the conference finals, which again, reminder, if they do, Detroit's 18th overall pick moves up to 17th, so go Cats. If Tkachuk does this and Florida moves on to the conference finals, you're going to hear Matthew Tkachuk for the next 10 years. He is going to be the prototypical NHL player who gets it done in the regular season and postseason. Now, obviously, everyone would love a Connor McDavid, but we just haven't found the lab that they made him in yet. So, yeah, Matthew Tkachuk is going to be the face of what NHL GMs are going to seek all the time, for better or worse, because they're going to have a lot of misses and they're going to overpay a lot of guys who just aren't Matthew Tkachuk.
And at the end of the day, those guys just turn into checking forwards.
That's right.
They just get into the shit.
And then the Red Wings have some more fourth liners. But no, I think the archetype of player he is what's going to make teams see past the red flags.
Where does he end up?
Bertuzzi?
Yeah, I'm kind of running through the teams in my head right now. There's some interesting fits, some better fits, but those teams are capped out. It's gonna be fascinating to see who's in the market for him. First team jumped to mind was Minnesota, but they're about to enter their $14 million of dead cap.
That's funny. That was the team that came to my mind too, but I have no reason why.
He just feels like a Minnesota type. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What about LA? I don't know what their cap situation is like.
It's not great, and they've got some raises coming up. Here's one that makes sense, especially considering he's from Sudbury, Ottawa.
I was going to say Winnipeg.
No,
Winnipeg does have the biggest Sudbury vibes.
That's Sudbury North.
Yeah.
Oh, Brady Tkachuk, Tyler Bertuzzi would be nasty to play against.
Ottawa's in the category of they're putting the foot on the gas. They're looking for guys. So
Yeah, you're not wrong.
and they are probably one of the few teams who would want a Tyler Bertuzzi that will have the cap space for a Tyler Bertuzzi.
And that's not a far flight home for him.
Exactly. That's what I mean. He's, Northern Ontario to kind of not really Northern Ontario.
Guess how long that drive is still.
It's still probably 7-8 hours.
6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The top of Ontario is colossal. Anyhow,
It takes 24 hours to drive through Ontario.
his name is going to be at the top of a lot of lists. I think we just need to see how the cap situations shake out, and we're going to need to see some moves made. Now, for folks who don't know, Bertuzzi can sign a maximum 8-year contract with Boston if it gets done before free agency. The moment it ticks over to unrestricted free agency period, then the most he can sign is a 7-year deal with anyone. So that's what Tyler Bertuzzi is working with. But yeah, whether or not you agree he's a fit for the Red Wings in the future, our spectrum of opinions, I think we all agree. The chances are low. Never say never, but something would have to change. Steve Yzerman isn't in the Red Wings in their plan. Like, it's not that Steve Yzerman is hard-headed and it would never change his mind, but there are certain things that make sense for the Red Wings, and it doesn't really make sense to deviate away from them. So if something changes, I would have to imagine it'd be from Bertuzzi, but we'll see. Okay, let's jump into our conversation with Ken Daniels. We caught up with Ken to talk about how his offseason is going, the Stanley Cup playoffs, his take on Dylan Larkin, Mo Seider, Lucas Raymond, the Detroit Red Wings past season, what's coming up for Steve Yzerman in the offseason, and a look towards the future, and plenty more. So without further ado, lead announcer of the Detroit Red Wings, Ken Daniels. Ken, one of these days I'm going to make the interview process easier for you. I put you through the ringer every time you need to log on.
That's okay, as long as your quality works.
Well, we'll see. We'll see at the other end, because I know you won't re-record with me, so this is our one shot to get it right. Folks, Ken Daniels is joining us for the first time this offseason. Ken, how are the first few weeks of non-Red Wings hockey going for you?
Going okay. I had some speaking engagements out of town, so I was busy through the first round of the playoffs, and that worked out very well for me. And went to the game in Toronto for number 5, so that was wonderful too. And I always prayed for chaos, even though I'm from Toronto, and people always ask me, do you root for the Leafs? And it drives my brother who lives in Toronto crazy that I don't. I don't wish them any ill will. I've just always prayed for chaos. But now that they got through that round, I think they're going to be a force to deal with now, because I think that was the big thing mentally for them. And as uptight as they may have been, I think getting through that really was beyond just a victory. It was a huge, since 2004, craziness of 19 years. So I thought maybe if it went to 7, there could be even greater chaos, but I'm glad they finally won for my family's sake, who still root for them. I don't root against them, but I'm happy for the likes of Kyle Dubas, and I never believed that even if the Leafs were out in the first round, that Brendan Shanahan would make a move, and I still think he would have been there, that Kyle Dubas wouldn't, because Kyle Dubas would be gobbled up in no time. I think he's done a nice job, and you can't blame him for taking the chances and making moves that he did. This is far from a team that years ago and for the past few years was losing. So, I think Kyle Dubas was there anyway, and this will be more proof of that.
Yeah, I was going to mention you being from Toronto. It's really hard to articulate sometimes if folks haven't been around just how big this is for the world of hockey, north of the border, especially like the weight that's lifted off of them. And I agree with you. They're playing with house money now in their minds. Like, I think we're going to see a version of that core that's going to play with a certain kind of stress that they won't have anymore, that they've been playing with, since they joined the team. So I do wish Toronto a little bit of ill will. It's funny when they lose, but they got past the first round demon. So yeah, I'm with you on just cheering for chaos now. And the playoffs so far have been full of it.
Oh, I love it. And that's why even though I was busy and a little bit of travel in there with speaking engagements, it was still so much fun and every night to watch. And now, I was thinking the other night, I go, wow, we could have a Florida-Seattle Cup final. Wouldn't that be something? And and then you could have Toronto-Edmonton Cup final. Wouldn't that be something? So I love it. People were saying when teams were down 3-1, will we get game 7s? And I'm thinking, yeah, because I just knew there would be. Florida surprised me, but when they got that first one in Boston, then I started to wonder a little bit. And then in the end, and even when my wife came in and she watched game 7 with me, and she's watching it and she said to me, is Florida actually a better team than Boston? Because they sure look like it. And I said, well, yeah. And it almost looked like Boston, the weight heavy as the head that wears the crown, and no crown heavier than what Boston did this season, even though with shootout points, et cetera, the most points, okay, whatever. It can go with an asterisk. They're a very deep and good team, but they just looked uptight in the end. And it seemed to be that Florida was handling it better. And Matthew Tkachuk to another level now, and I thought he would have ended it on a breakaway, and wouldn't that have been something? But still, just the way they did. And then, of course, after I finished watching that game, I said, we have to flip over and listen to Jack Edwards' call, and likening it to the Hindenburg. And I thought, okay, that's classic Jack. I love listening to the other guys' calls, and I have a tendency to listen to the local feeds in the first round where I can than watching the national games. It's more interesting to me to go back and forth and hear how they're calling it, whether their team's winning or losing. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And I'm going to state the obvious here. How good is it going to feel once Hockeytown gets to be part of this again? Like, the greatest spectacle in sports in my mind is the first round of the playoffs. Like, spring hockey, it changes the game in Detroit when that team's in the playoffs.
Oh, for sure it does. Oh, yeah. And I said at the start of the year, and probably on your podcast, and I've been with you guys a few times and elsewhere, I didn't think the Red Wings were making the playoffs this year, so it's not shocking to me. And I think you said, what would be your expectations this year? My expectations were that they would be involved in important games come February and March. And in fact, they were. And then that stumbled just before Ottawa, which made the moves at the deadline. But honestly, in my heart of hearts, I still think, even if they were close there, that Steve still was going to do what he had to do at the deadline. It would have been nice to get in, but even then, that was an uphill climb. And I never thought the Red Wings weren't a good enough team to get in, just get in, not make noise. But then I looked around and saw who was there up against them. And I actually thought Buffalo and Ottawa would be better than they were this year. But then when you looked at Florida and Toronto and Tampa and Boston and the other side, there was just too many teams that were better at this juncture. And there might still be next year too. And that's okay. This team is building in the right direction.
You talked about the season. I think, like you said, the end result was kind of what we expected. And the highs were maybe a little bit different than what we thought. We didn't think that they'd get that close to a playoff spot. And the lows, especially with how the season ended, the injuries to Rasmussen and such, and trading away key players were lower. But through all the storylines, Bertuzzi missing most of the season, Verona obviously being gone almost the entire season, Larkin's contract year. What are some of your key takeaways from the year and overall kind of assessment of how the Red Wings did?
The thing that stands out to me, and I believe at the start of the year when I said the Red Wings would finish with 87 points. So they were under that. So it wasn't going to be good enough for the playoffs. But again, the competitiveness and to be in games and what Steve did to add that veteran leadership. When I look back at the season, I think the most surprising thing to me is how much the Red Wings missed Michael Rasmussen. I think at the start of the year, you never would have thought that. But Rasmussen was injured in the 3-0 loss to Tampa Bay when Andrei Vasilevsky, if he played as well in these playoffs, Toronto wouldn't be where they are now if Vasilevsky played like he did that night in whatever it was, 47 shots or whatever Detroit had in the 3-0 win. Yeah. But that was really the start of the downfall, because after that and the 2 losses to Ottawa, that did in Detroit. And it was such a major effort, and that was the game that Rasmussen was injured in. And I think there could have been even a little bit more pushback against Ottawa with him in there. And again, at the start of the year, you never would have thought that. I mean, Rasmussen a couple of years ago, and we joked about the New Year's Eve resolutions, right? What's your resolution? To be better at hockey. And damn if the guy didn't get better at hockey. Question what you want about a 9th overall pick, but you know what? He's been a really useful guy, and he gives a lot of presence and size. So that was my takeaway around that time in the loss to Tampa Bay when the Red Wings were still in it. I didn't think they'd have enough to keep it going, but then he was injured, and all the injuries played a role. And sure, as you mentioned, Bertuzzi and Vrana, et cetera, that all played a key factor. Even when Maatta was out for a little bit, right? And it broke up a fine pairing that he was doing so well with Hronek. So different stretches through the season where you find that teams like Boston had the run they were on because of the great depth that they had. And they could add a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi. In teams with depth, even though you could say you're watching the first round of the playoffs and you're saying, what the hell does the regular season mean? Maybe not as much as we think, but you still need that depth come playoff time.
In the postseason presser, Steve Yzerman made a lot of kind of allusions to expecting a lot of the improvement from the Red Wings next season to come from their young guys. And he seemed to lean heavily on the likes of Joe Veleno and Lucas Raymond and wanting more from them. Didn't slander the game this year, but said he thinks that they're poised and should take a big next step. That's something that every GM says, but it seemed a little bit louder from Yzerman. What do you make of the team's expectation for the younger generation to just kind of take a big step this summer, and how that relates to, for example, how Lucas Raymond played this season?
Well, he's right. Lucas Raymond, I think, has to be a little bit heavier to play against. I think he's got it in him to do that. But I always go back to Larkin's second season in the league, and you learn and you have to adapt. And Dylan did, and got more inside and used more of the ice and just wasn't circling. And he found out in the second year it wasn't as easy to do that because you catch on. And I think they did for Lucas Raymond too. So he has to find different ways to get open and quieter spaces and battles for pucks. Not that he doesn't, but I think he can be heavier in that regard. Joe Veleno too. I don't know what the offensive ceiling is for him. It's not like he was going to be a great goal scorer, but Joe Veleno has a competitive edge to him, and I think he can be a very useful guy. So too can still be Filip Zadina. But again, is he going to be a top 6? No, he's not. But how valuable can he be in a bottom 6 role and still under a good contract and a smart player, good zone entries? He can make things happen. He's just never had that finish. So maybe he has to work on that shooting ability. Now, whether Zadina's here longer term or Steve Yzerman with deals in the summer, who knows? But I believe you do need those guys who haven't produced to find that offense that you didn't get from them, because you're going to have to hang in games from unexpected sources, and they're going to have to find that from those guys.
Yzerman went out shopping last offseason. I don't think he'll do the same this offseason, mostly just because the same supply isn't there in free agency. But between what is in free agency and, let's say, the Jets, who seem to be poised to blow things up, do you think there's some moves to be made for the Yzerman's path to kind of continue as he started last year?
Well, I think the Jets will blow things up because their coach is coming back. So after what he said, I wondered somebody had to go. But there was no doubt even partway through the season that there were going to be changes in Winnipeg. There's always been a dysfunction in that room. But if he's going to be looking at anything in Winnipeg, I think you're going to go to Andrew Copp and find out what went on in that room. I don't think he wouldn't use those players to get their feelings on that. But to me, defensive-wise, I look at two righties, which could slide in nicely. One would be Scott Mayfield, if he does hit unrestricted free agency, and another would be Radko Gudas. But I don't believe you want to overpay it. I'm not sure, having not looked at comparable contracts or what those might be. But if you wanted two guys who are going to give you some grit, who can play and not hurt you, then you've got currency. You've got so many on the left side that you could make deals for and move elsewhere, not necessarily this summer, but through the year or next summer, to build out your roster. So I think those might be two guys on the back end you'd look at. And if you're going to look at Winnipeg or changes now that'll be happening maybe in Calgary, it was clear that those guys did not want to play for Darryl Sutter. And that seemed pretty obvious when the GM even left too. And now the coach is gone also. So it's not a great free agency crop out there to be had. There's Severson, I guess, maybe a possibility too, but, so there are some that he could tinker with the roster. I don't see it being as full out as he did last year either. And that was really to add some structure to the room. And he did that very well.
We were talking a little bit about the draft before we hit record here. And, not to get into the nitty gritty of every single player name, but we were saying that the Red Wings have picks 9 and 18, maybe 18, unless Florida goes to the conference finals, in which case that becomes 17. On last episode, I said my hot take is I don't think Detroit makes both picks as they are. Where do you stand on that with Detroit's assets and the holes that they have on the roster? What do you think some things that Yzerman could do are?
I'm with you. I don't think they make both picks where they are either. And you've got, 5 in the first 45 or 47 or something, like whatever it may be. I don't know. Somewhere around there. And you've got Boston's pick next year and what they're going to lose with likely Bergeron and Krejci, and who knows where they're going to be next year too. Could that be in play? I don't think both 9 and 18, and that's not to say that 18 couldn't be moved with something else to move up if a player's still there. I know we talk about offense. To me, you can find offense to add, whether it be through trade or free agency down the road when this team, maybe in a couple of years, is ready to make a push in a first round or through the season. When I watch the U18 and I see Axel Sandin Pellika, boy, I like him. And I'm just, you look at a blue line where you have Wallman and Seider and Edvinsson and Pellika a few years from now. And if you sign a Mayfield and Gudas, that would be pretty tough to play against. And what is Steve thinking now? I think everything he's done, whether it be moving Hronek or moving Bertuzzi, with all in sight of where is this team going to be, not this year or next, where are you going to be in 2 or 3 years when you're ready, not only just to get in the playoffs, but make a solid push for the playoffs, when maybe 3 years from now you're looking at the top of that division, because I don't think Tampa has a draft pick until 2030. So, where the teams are going to fall now, and a few years from now, where you're going to see probably Montreal and Buffalo and Ottawa and Detroit, and I think Toronto will still be there, but who knows with Matthews in another year and unrestricted, who knows? So there could be a changing of the guard by the time the Red Wings are ready to take that next step. So I like Sandin Pellika. I know they're looking for offense. Whether you take 9 and you package something else, what does Arizona really need? If someone they want is still there, Will Smith is still there, do they move to 6? Do they move to 7? What's the currency to give up to get there? So I can see Steve making moves. I was right a couple of years ago when I did say the Red Wings would move their 22nd pick or 21, whatever you want to view that, because of the forfeit by Arizona. It always gets screwed up whether Cossa was 15 or 14. Depends how you want to look at it. But I was right, and I said on our preview on Bally Sports Detroit, I could see Steve Yzerman moving to take Cossa to bypass Ken Holland, because I know that Ken Holland wanted Sebastian Cossa. And then when Cossa was gone, Kenny didn't even take Jesper Wallstedt, bypassed that to take Borchio and went to the Quebec League. So I was right on that one where Steve moved up. He had the currency to do it and got the man that he wanted. Is there a man that he really wants, whether it be 6, 7, or 8, if not there, or 18 isn't going to be there, the guy he wants to move up? I wouldn't put it past him. He's got the currency to do it, and that's what's so fascinating.
So you're not a big, it doesn't matter, the 5% chance of winning the lottery or 10% chance of whatever's going to hit?
It's funny you said that. I don't even think about that. And, when we were on, we have our Bally calls, in the morning and on a day of a game. We talk about that and where the Red Wings are in the playoffs. And I never, as I said to you, I never thought playoffs were a reality. Would have loved to have seen it. But again, just because of the teams around us, I didn't think it was a reality. And I used to say to them, if the Red Wings are winning games now, and I know that even Newsy joked about it, how management and the scouts may not be happy that they're winning games, or maybe they shouldn't down the stretch. I said to them all the time, I said, if they're going to be 10-9, I said, let's get to 7. I mean, if you're not going to win games, let's get to 7. So if you're at 7 and you really had a guy at 5, maybe it doesn't matter. You're moving 2 picks. If you wind up being 11, you're not getting to 6. Because there's too much of discrepancy there. Even if you're moving with Arizona, do they want to drop back to 11? No. But if you were 9 or you were 8 or you were 7, now if you needed to get to 5, you probably could, depending if, So it's just in a position to move. But to the answer to your question, I never thought was, percentage chance from 5% to 8% to draft 1 or 2, Fantilli or Bedard. Never entered my mind. I just wanted to be in a position because there are a lot of good players. If you ever found Bedard or Fantilli and you could do that, wonderful. Isn't that great? But that never really entered my thinking. It was just, my thinking was always to be in a position to move if you needed to get the best player available. And whether it be, there are so many out there, right? From Smith and others that you could move to. So I'm not really sure where they're going in that way.
All right, and last hockey question here before we talk about the important stuff. Knowing the first round results, I mean, we're recording before Game 7 of Rangers Devils, so forgive that. Who's your pick for the Cup? Or the finals, let's say. Well,
it had been Boston, but I had to work some things around and take some on Florida last night. I've got Edmonton coming out of the West, but Dallas scares me. Seattle, Florida final would terrify me, but I wouldn't be looking at that one just for interest's sake. It would be a cool story, though. So I've had Edmonton in the West, and if it wasn't Boston, I had the Rangers in the East.
Similar as you, I picked the Oilers, but man, Dallas just looks so complete, and Jake Ottinger's, that is a scary goalie to play against.
Yep, they've done a really nice job. And that one draft with Heiskanen and Ottinger and
Robertson. Robertson was 1 pick after Gustav Lindstrom. Heartbreaking.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, it happens, and it's we always talk about being a crapshoot at that time. And I asked Jim Nill too, and I said, Heiskanen or Makar, how well did you know Cale Makar? He goes, well, actually in the same area, living, I knew Cale Makar very well, and it was a toss-up. And we just thought because Makar was still junior, and where we looked at Heiskanen playing against men, we thought Heiskanen was more ready, and that's where we went. Now, okay, hindsight, is Makar better? Sure, but by how much? And as he said to me, Heiskanen is our Nicholas Lidstrom. And he's not wrong on that. So that's the draft, but even one spot, right? It's nice to have choices. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's nice to have choices if you can move up a couple of spots or be there. But I'm with you on the Rangers. I had the Rangers or Boston a while ago, and the Rangers, I just think fitting in all the pieces, they had to find their game, and then Zibanejad finally comes alive, and you hope that will continue. And Patrick Kane's just dealing with the hip injury. He's still, you can see, he's just not 100%, but how much puck is there to go around for that team? But in the end, it's going to be Shesterkin outdueling the guy at the other end, I think, if they're going to keep it going.
Well, we'll see how it all shakes out, but let's take some time here at the end to talk about Saturday, August 26th at 6 p.m., the Roast and Toast. It's a double feature of Thomas Holmstrom, who is being roasted, and Nicholas Lidstrom, who you can do nothing else other than toast him. Tell us a little bit about that event in benefit of the Jamie Daniels Foundation.
Right, because how do you roast a perfect human? You just can't. And when I spoke to Henrik Zetterberg, if he can be in town, he'll be there. And many of the Red Wings will be there. We'll do our silent auction, which will be up 3 weeks before. We'll have a live auction as well. It's at 6 o'clock at Motor City at Soundboard in the ballroom across the hall. So you can mingle with some NHLers. And on the dais who we have roasting, well, first off, Mike Doc Emmerich is back for a second time. He did Mickey's live event. And since we did Mickey in 2019, we've done 2 virtual roasts of Scotty Bowman and of Brett Hull on televised event. And this one will likely be televised after the fact, too. Scotty Bowman was going to be there. He was also going to be part of the Roast and Toast, but his grandkids, for his 90th birthday, which I believe is September 18th, Our event is August 26th. Scotty was going to be there, but he begged off when he called me. He said, my family, the grandkids are taking me on a Disney cruise. And I said, well, what the hell? Why wouldn't you do that? That's pretty obvious. But we've got videos from NHLers, coaches, management from around the National Hockey League at the dinner for those who couldn't be there as well. And on the day is to roast, so Doc Emmerich's going to host. Steve Ott, former Red Wing, is going to be one of the roasters. Chris Draper, Ian Bagg, who's done our comedy nights and was there for Mickey's live roast. And I think he was part of Scotty Bowman's as well. And who am I missing? Jim Ralph is going to be there, the Leafs radio analyst, former goaltender, and one of the best after-dinner speakers and impressionists you've ever heard. And I just texted Ralphie now because I just heard they're actually traveling, Jim Ralph and Joe Bowen, to do Leaf radio on the road for the second round after I guess Joe misidentified Tavares, calling it off television as Morgan Riley to get the winner. And I could see how that was happening because during COVID, we did it too. It's not easy off of television. But I texted Jim Ralph and I said, boy, one screw up by Joe. Had you known that, you should have done that 2 years ago. But now there was really something to screw up. So anyway, they get to travel again. So good for them. But Ott and Draper and Jim Ralph and Ian Bagg and Doc Emmerich. And hopefully we'll have upwards of 800 to 1,000 at Motor City Soundboard. So you can go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org. If anyone would like to sponsor the event right now, sponsorship details are out there. Believe tickets will be roughly around $300 for a full plated meal and the evening and all the drinks. And to me, listen, you can go to a hockey game and pay that. Well, here you can come and see the players and talk to them and have your meal and your drinks, and it's a fun night. And we're looking at, we haven't identified final pricing yet for the upper level at Soundboard. There will be a less expensive ticket for up top too, food as well, and all your drinks and the whole evening. It just wouldn't be a plated meal. It'd be more hors d'oeuvre style as well. So there will be some options there, and we should have that up finalized in the next few weeks at jamiedanielsfoundation.org. But if anyone goes there now, there are sponsorship items available, which you can buy a table with a celebrity, without a celebrity. Pricing is on there too, whatever you'd like to do. So it'll be wonderful.
And you'll see us there as well. It's going to be a great time at Motor City Casino Hotel. We don't count as a celebrity at your table, though, unfortunately, but we'll still bring some of you out there. So like Ken said, jamiedanielsfoundation.org. One last thing, Ken, while you're here, I'm going to just use you to boost Wings money on the board. Our goal for this season, and we're going to run this right through the draft, is $50,000 raised from all avenues, including your generous support from the Winged Wheel Podcast night and day at the LCA events. So wingedwheelpodcast.com/wings MOTB. You can make your pledge retroactively. You can pledge for the draft, the lottery, whatever you want to do. There's going to be prizes, jerseys, the special Winged Wheel Podcast Red Wings hat. Lots in there for you to win, and it's, of course, supporting a great cause. So please be sure to check that out, and, of course, the Roast and Toast event for the Jamie Daniels Foundation.
What you guys have done, as I've said to you in the live events, is truly amazing. And what you did for us, another $15,000 just out of your own pockets, is beyond anything we could have ever imagined. And Red Wing fandom and what Prashant has done. All you guys are truly amazing with the money you've raised over, what is it, 3 years now? Or 3 years?
Yeah, it's been a few years, yeah.
I mean, you guys, depending what happens this year, upwards like close to 100,000. I mean, yeah. Isn't it? It's pretty incredible. So we couldn't do what we do without you guys spreading the word and Red Wing fans. And we'd love to see. I know many were at the breakfast that we had, the hot stove stories with Ken and Mick and the referees, and that was a great morning. It was a lot of fun. It exceeded my expectations, and hopefully, it goes to a great cause. I know some people think, boy, that's expensive. Well, it's not cheap. But you do get your money's worth. And anyone who was at Mickey's live event, they'll never forget it. It was fantastic. And you get to mingle with NHLers and get autographs and selfies and pictures and be part of something and laugh a lot. And that's why we do what we do, is because Jamie's laugh was infectious. He loved to laugh. And that's why we came up with the idea of roasts or just talking about the breakfasts and what you guys do. You keep talking about it. That ends the shame and statement. We have to talk about this. And that's what we do. And thanks for all you do.
Of course. And we're looking forward not just to the event, but to continue to spread the word, raise money, and raise that bar year over year. So appreciate you letting us help out however we can. Folks, this has been Ken Daniels, lead announcer of the Detroit Red Wings, good friend of the podcast. I owe him a drink for dragging him through these online interviews so often. And unfortunately, Ken, we're going to do this again over the summer. So until next time.
We will. And thank you. And I owe you dinner because you paid last time when you came into town, remember, because of the credit card thing. So I owe you dinner. So not a problem.
That's right. All right. Take care. Welcome back. That was our conversation with Ken Daniels. Looking forward to having him back and see how the summer's going. But good to get his thoughts on the Red Wings season and obviously all that important information about the Jamie Daniels Foundation, our work with Wings Money on the Board, and the roast and toast of Thomas Holmstrom and Nicholas Lidstrom. We'll see you there. I liked what he said about Andrew Copp and using Andrew Copp as intel on who in Winnipeg is going to be a potential problem and who would be worth bringing over. Like, that is a really good point, and obviously that's what the upper management's going to do if they're going to target any of those guys. But, you know, for a guy who was in that room for a long time, you can sit down and ask him and say, hey, we're thinking of making a move for Connor. Culturally, is he going to fit, or is this going to be a problem?
Ben Chiarot also spent a lot of time in Winnipeg.
It's the kind of thing that you can and should do.
And those are two assistant captains on the Detroit Red Wings. So those are opinions that the management would take very seriously.
Also, I mean, thoughts on performance aside, it does bode well that they brought in guys who came from that system and have come in Detroit and have not made waves or ruffled feathers the way there has been constant explosions going on in the Winnipeg room. So,
hot take, maybe they're both away from Winnipeg because they were like, get me the hell away from this.
Yeah. And that kind of thing matters. But yeah, that was a really good point, I thought. Let's talk about the playoffs. Boston. What the hell? Look, credit to Florida. I think Florida played a disruptive kind of game, and, you know, they were on top of Boston way more than people would have thought, and they capitalized on, you know, injuries and illnesses and whatever. They deserve to win that series. They won it. But Boston, after a record-setting season, you're going to lose like that?
They look terrible.
Bad
puck management. They had no answers for Florida's unrelenting forecheck. It was just, I don't know what team I was watching, but it wasn't the Boston Bruins that I know.
The overtime in Game 7 was the most scared I've ever seen a team play.
Oh, they looked like they were horrified of what was inevitably going to come.
Every puck they were handling like it was a live hand grenade with the pin pulled. So many turnovers, so many giveaways. Every time Florida got in the zone, it just felt like it was going to end in a goal the way they were running around. And I thought Boston was supposed to be the anti-all of this team in the NHL. We've got the veteran leadership. We're calm, cool, collected. We can handle anything. Wow, it was jarring. It literally caught me completely off guard watching.
Ullmark looked bad. He started to look really bad, and then
he was hurt, apparently.
Well, I think that probably came from his agent, because otherwise, I don't care how good of a season the coaching staff had. You fire him if they're going to put in Ullmark when he's hurt, and you have Jeremy Swayman as a backup.
Well, the coaching conversation is interesting because Paul Maurice grabbed Jim Montgomery by his backpack and stuffed him into a locker. Like, the adjustments Boston made didn't really happen, and they happened all too late, and Florida just exploited Boston at every corner
for the last 3 games.
Ones that mattered.
Yep.
That might be it for Patrice Bergeron, but based on the way him and Marchand hugged, it looked really, really loud that, you know, that is going to be all said and done for Patrice Bergeron. They don't know what's going to happen with Krejci. How long does Marchand have left? They have cap questions to answer. Are they going to be able to keep both Ullmark and Swayman? Like, there's
$4.5 million in bonus overages that will apply to their cap situation next year.
Like, all of this could have happened in the Cup Finals or the Conference Finals, and the same things would apply. But to not win a single round after a legitimate, historic season across all of NHL history, you are, you know, by points, the most successful NHL franchise in a regular season, and you lose like that is, I mean, we all laughed. I think all of us tweeted something out, like literally just laughing out loud, but that is the most gut-wrenching way to see Patrice Bergeron's career end.
Oh, Absolutely. He's one of the very few Bruins in the history of hockey that you actually want all the good things for. So it's a shame his season finished the way it did with the injury in Game 82, missing part of the playoff series, going down into Game 7. But again, a team that's already tight to the cap is going to have $4.5 million overages, probably won't be able to keep most, if not any, of their unrestricted free agents, might lose their top 2 centers to retirement. Feels like their 2024 first-round pick could be pretty important.
Detroit owns that.
Huh.
That is a top 10 protected.
Never thought that would be a relevant statement.
I know. We talked about the prospect of it a little bit ago, but
we were talking, hey, maybe next year the Bruins pick won't be in the 30s. It'll be in the early 20s if all goes well for Detroit. But yeah, this is now, before I say this, I know what everybody's thinking. We've said this about Boston every year for 12 years. Yes, I understand that we think they're going to regress. All the signs are going to point to them regressing, and then they're absolutely not going to regress.
Yeah,
I know that is the most likely outcome here, but there's a chance.
There is a chance.
The ingredients are there.
So for full clarity, Detroit owns Boston's 2024 first-round pick. So much like they have their own in the Islanders this year, and the Islanders was conditional, and they kept it. In 2024, they have their own. In Boston's, it's top 10 protected, which means if Boston ends up in the top 10 teams in the draft or after the draft lottery, then for the 2024 draft, then it slides to 2025, and it's fully unprotected in that case. We got that confirmed, but this is looking good. Again, don't count Boston out, like Brad said, but it's looking good for Detroit. And hey, just from a pure hockey rival standpoint, it's always good to see the team atop the Atlantic, your own division, fall like that. Like, that bodes well.
Just as a sports fan in general, watching any team from Boston crash and burn is always a good time.
I will say I do think the Leafs dodged a lot of anxiety. A historic.
Did they?
Well, I don't think Florida. Well, Florida took them to task the first game and they won, so the Leafs are already down 1-0. But I think that feels different than facing Boston next series. Boston is a demon for them.
Well, maybe the way the first game went, maybe they are hoping they would have played that Boston Bruins team that showed up in the first round.
If Florida keeps going against really tough, talented teams like they did against Boston and managed to do game 1 against Toronto, this could be some kind of postseason for them. That's an impressive
their stride
team.
at the right time.
Oh man, they are absolutely getting hot at the right time. And let me just say, if Toronto runs into Bobrovsky, like the Bobrovsky who comes up for seemingly 20 games at a time and then disappears, they're so screwed.
Yeah,
it's going to be a good series.
I'm really looking forward to this inevitable Florida-Seattle Cup final.
NHL wouldn't be mad because Seattle
is money,
but they already lost a lot of money with Toronto-Boston.
There was a point a week ago the NHL was staring dead in the face of a Rangers-Bruins-Toronto, all in the second round of the Eastern Conference. The money they would have generated from that.
Man, they should get rid of the salary cap, then that could happen more often.
Piss off.
Yep.
But yes, thankfully Seattle saved their bacon. Seattle and Vegas advancing in the West kind of balanced that out a little bit.
Battle of the Hudson. The Rangers fall in Game 7 to the Devils. The Devils just looked like the better team, as it was a decisive victory in Game 7. Gerard Gallant is going to get a cab called for him again, maybe here. Like, I don't know if it's fair or not, but the implosion in New York this wasn't a typical 7-game. They shouldn't have lost in 7 based on how they started the season, and very obviously that fan base in that franchise feels the same way.
Listen, I understand that the Rangers have not been a great 5-on-5 team since Gerard Gallant took over, and they've leaned a little too heavy on their power play and their goaltending. But, oh my God, did the Rangers have a record number of no-shows in that series.
Yep.
Panarin, nothing. Kane, whatever. Tarasenko had like 2 good games. Lafreniere put up what's the old quote? 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Lafreniere trade, what's it called? Rumors are back on the menu.
Oh my! And the asking price isn't that high anymore. But
they did not show up. It was pathetic.
Yeah, the Rangers couldn't score a goal. The New York Rangers, the Mika Zibanejad, Artemi Panarin, Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, Chris Kreider, Adam Fox led New York Rangers couldn't get a goal.
Elsewhere, in the West. Seattle did it against Colorado.
Seattle
is a team of just second liners.
But they have 4 second lines. Isn't that
four
the
of
joke?
them, yes, and they just come at you in waves. Like, they're very impressive. They don't have any true star power like other teams do. But man, do they all commit to one singular purpose, and they all pull the rope the same way, and they're extremely structured and disciplined as a team. Like, it's like, could this be the Red? Like, is this like the archetype of the Red Wings if we're not going to get an elite talent?
Yeah, it could be. And like, they were missing some key players, some high scorers, and we
don't have a Jared McCann yet. But
no, and they didn't for game 1.
Toronto did, but then they protected Justin Hall. But
who they had to sit to win. So in a way, they still got their victory. But Seattle beat a very, very, very scary Dallas team in game 1.
And all it took was for Oliver Bjorkstrand to look like Alex Ovechkin.
And that was a player they picked. That was a really intelligent pickup and a miss by Columbus.
I really want to hear the behind-the-scenes story of what happened with that trade, because did you hear Friedman talking about that?
No.
Apparently, Columbus had a deal in place, sort of, with another team for Bjorkstrand. And I think the exact quote was, they screwed around too much, so Columbus went, screw it, and traded him to Seattle instead.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
Good for them.
I have deep respect for that. But
that's a Jarmo Kekalainen story if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, 1,000%. So, just the way things have to shake down to shape the NHL.
Anyhow, Seattle and Dallas. Seattle already up to a 1-0 lead. Florida and Toronto. Florida took game 1, so the road teams both took game 1. And we were recording before Carolina, New Jersey kicks off and before Vegas, Edmonton kicks off. And that Vegas, Edmonton series could be the series of the playoffs with the strength of those teams and how well they might be matched. I don't know what the difference is going to be there. It might come down to goaltending. So.
Yes, Laurent Brossoit and Stuart Skinner determining who might win the Stanley Cup this year.
We've heard crazier storylines.
Oh, well, right now, can the Carolina Hurricanes get one past Akira Schmid?
Evidently not.
Yeah, this is remember how last episode we talked about the Hellebuck to Detroit possibility, and we're like, we really like the goalie, but you just don't pay goalies anymore. And yes, you appreciate superstar goalies, but you have to not pay superstar goalies. Goalies that went out in the first round: Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, Sorokin. Like,
I heard. I don't quote me on the exact metric, but it was something like the top 4 goalies in save percentage.
Say there was something like that. Yeah, the top 5 goalies in save percentage are all out.
Like, crazy.
It's been as Ken said, these playoffs have been chaotic. I'm very happy for Seattle. I honestly love watching Dallas do their thing. Vegas, I like to see Vegas actually pull it together after what happened last season and missing the playoffs. And it's no secret how much I love watching Connor McDavid play. So all those teams in the West, I'm having a blast. And we have a vested interest as Red Wings fans to see Florida beat Toronto and Carolina and New Jersey. Don't discount either of those teams to make it further and come out of the East. So it's a lot of fun this second round.
4 very fast teams left in the East.
That's what I was interesting. That's what I was thinking about is who's the slow teams that are left? Vegas? Are they the only slow, what you'd say team foot speed is slow?
Yeah, but even Vegas kind of plays fast.
Yeah, they play up tempo.
Yeah, they play a very aggressive style. So this is a good second round, not necessarily financially for the NHL, but
for showcasing talent kind of thing.
Yes, this is what hockey should look like, at least as close as we can get with a collection of 8 teams in the second round.
Jacob Trouba would argue differently on your statement there.
Well, that's okay. He's not playing in the second round.
Well, we'll get to that one in a different episode. I want to talk very quickly about Calgary here. Obviously, Brad Treliving moved on. It was communicated that was essentially his decision, and a big part of that was maybe he's looking for a different challenge and didn't really like the direction of the franchise, especially as it went under head coach Darryl Sutter. And that was kind of projected a little ways out. Darryl Sutter got fired recently, and it essentially came down to the exit interviews for all the players were almost a universal hatred for him. And not only that, Frank Saravalli also reported essentially all the trade demands that Calgary was dealing with vanished after they fired Sutter.
Shocker.
So
This is the guy who didn't even remember the rookie they played in his first game.
I think he remembered and he was just being a prick.
Yeah, no, that it still amazes me. And you can almost apply this to the whole world, not just hockey. If you are the boss of anybody and you are a miserable piece of shit, the younger generation doesn't put up with it. They just don't. You can call them soft or you can, whatever your opinion on that, I don't care. Go either way. But this is the way it works. So if you don't want to lose all your star players, maybe don't hire a miserable piece of shit to be around them every day. And I don't mean to dump on a guy who just got fired, but this is the most universally hated coach we have seen since Mike Keenan, it feels like.
Yeah, like the amount of public statements coming out, it makes what's going on in Winnipeg, where Bonus is going against his players, and essentially that core is about to be blown up, most likely. Like,
at least Bonus has a point.
Yeah. There's something about
not wrong.
Power plays and how they struggled on the power play, and Sutter called that out at one point, and then one of the players said, we didn't even work on it once all year. Like, how are you going to complain about that when we didn't work on it once all year? And hey, look, I think Sutter's a successful coach, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Brad. It's just not for this era anymore. Agree or disagree, it's the reality of these players. You know, player empowerment, the player agency, having more and more control over a team. That's the way sports overall are trending, and it's really seeping into the NHL now. You have to be able to be a coach that's dynamic and foster success across a variety of personality types. And you also have to know if you can't work with a guy, then you have to use your coaching staff to work with that guy. And very obviously Sutter, he didn't lose that room. He took that room, lobbed it a foot in front of him, and punted that thing to the 50-yard line. Like, it was so apparent. It's so loud. When your trade requests publicly dissolve like that, and they made the right choice. I think they owe him $4 million a year or something like that.
Yeah, they're paying him basically, what was it, $8 million to stay the hell away from the team.
Well, once they found out that the taxpayers will be paying for the new arena, they're like, whatever, we'll just fire him. What's $4 million bucks?
They saved, absolutely. That's the way ownership is looking at that, because they saved way more than $4 million on that arena. Yeah. We'll talk about that one.
The one thing that I started thinking about was, did Johnny Gaudreau's situation changed?
I thought it was just a Boudreaux thing.
I literally had a brain cramp. Him leaving Calgary, was that a symptom of Sutter? Like, did they let this go on too long? Like, there's so many things that happened.
What about Tkachuk
in the past season for Calgary that make me think, was this just, I didn't want to deal with the coach anymore?
Well, it could be relevant because when Gaudreau left Calgary, we all thought he was going to Philly. Now, obviously, there's a lot of talk that Philly was never interested, but Tortorella was there. If you're getting away from Darryl Sutter, you're not going to Tortorella. He ends up in Columbus, who I think Brad Larson was the coach at the time. Who knows? But Tkachuk left and, at the time thought he was going to play for Andrew Brunette, I believe, because that wasn't resolved yet. Either way, they did. They both left while Sutter was there very rapidly, and, Tkachuk just straight up said, trade me. So, yeah, maybe there's something there.
Well, we'll see what Calgary does. Their main priority now, I think, for next season, they have to find a GM. It looks to be Craig Conroy. They have to find a coach, and they have to unlock Huberdeau, because that is, that's who the core is built around now. They got rid of Tkachuk. They brought in Huberdeau, Weegar.
Hey, Andrew Brunette's available.
Anyhow, lots happening there. Just a little funny the way that one shook out. All right, let's jump into overtime, because, Brad, you have a house to renovate. Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Again, if you want to support the show, it means so much to us. The bonus episodes, the Discord, the giveaways, there's a ton of benefits. Helps us grow the show. Expected by Whom, the newest podcast in the Winged Wheel Podcast Content Network. And it just means a lot to us for those of you who can support. For those who want to support but can't contribute to Patreon, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and give us a rating. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it might be. It means a lot. It helps the show quite a bit. So thank you again. Patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Let's take some questions from patrons. Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels says, so I'm a big Riley Heidt fan. I think he's super underrated, 97 points in 67 games. I'm wondering if you've heard anything on why he's not rated higher. I've really scouted him hard and like everything I see.
Upside. Generally, that's going to be the answer for players who have a very, who have a game like Riley Heidt that there's very few weaknesses. You like what you see. So if they have a good game and they're not really very highly, well, it's how high is that game? Is Riley Heidt going to be a top 6 contributor in the NHL in terms of his talent level? There's a lot of questions around that, and most tend to think the answer is no. So that's really all it is.
Joseph Barry says, should Detroit possibly explore trying to get one of Los Angeles's few right D prospects?
Oh my God, who do they have there? They've got Durzi, Brandt Clark, and they're not moving Brandt Clark.
No. Well, he had the rumor for him recently.
Yeah, I was for Chychrun.
And they flat out said pretty publicly, like, this guy's
if you're not trading Brandt Clark for Jacob Chychrun, there's nothing Detroit has that's going to pull Brandt Clark away from LA. Because he was almost 2 points per game when he came back to the OHL this year as a defenseman, which is crazy.
He was more impactful than Shane Wright was.
Literally, yes.
Helga Grans, they have. Yeah, they're options. I don't know that you necessarily target them. I think the Red Wings will probably look draft. Let's see where they come out of the draft. Ken said, like, Sandin Pellika and Reinbacher. I know in our mock draft we didn't have any defensemen in the top 10 or something.
But neither of those guys made it to the Red Wings pick with the Islanders in our mock.
And we're almost universally, we always do this. When there isn't like a hot defensive pick, we usually slide further in our mocks without picking a defenseman, but we acknowledge real drafts don't typically go that way. I don't know. I think Reinbacher will break the top 10. I don't know if both will.
Well, if the Red Wings want either of them, they have to take him at 9.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if either of them made it to 18.
Commander Ben Barron of the Cheeseback Space Force says, hey, fellas, hockey strategy question. When a team goes 11-7, which is to say 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, how are the lines and defensive pairs deployed? I've never quite understood it. Thanks for the help and keep up the great work.
There's a lot of ways to do this, so I'll give the most common one. So let's take Edmonton, for example, because you have to have a very strong top 6 forward group to make this work, because essentially your fourth line's running a body short. So what Edmonton would do in their scenario is let's say, send the McDavid line, send the Draisaitl line, send the third line, that McDavid goes and plays a shift with the fourth line. Then Draisaitl's line goes, then McDavid's line goes, and the third line goes, and then Draisaitl goes and plays a shift with the fourth line. Is generally how that'll work. Now, sometimes in these scenarios, teams will just basically run 3 lines because their fourth line sucks, and they're like, hey, these guys are going to play 5 minutes tonight, and we're just going to ride our horses. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but those are the 2 most common ways.
CJ Wilkinson says, fun, debatable question. What happens first? The Lions win a Super Bowl or the Red Wings win another cup? Look, I got the grit hat on right now. I've heard mixed reviews on the Lions draft. I know positional value is a big thing. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it. I think the Lions could potentially win the division next year. I stand by what I feel this in my bones, and until I see anything to lift the curse, same way a Leafs fan would look at the first round, there's nothing. No matter how good I see the Lions on the field, I just can't tell myself they are going to win the Super Bowl. I just can't do it.
Okay, so someone who doesn't have to deal with the Lions Super Bowl curse, I got my own to work on. What I will say is this is where hockey and football being fundamentally different sports applies. And I'm going to say the Red Wings probably win a cup first, because in the NFL, you almost cannot win a Super Bowl without an elite quarterback. And hey, I know Jared Goff's better than public perception says he is, but I don't think you win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. So until that gets addressed for the Lions, I don't see it happening for them.
Last one here, Coyote season tickets in Tempe says, I'm heading out from Phoenix on a red eye to Miami on Saturday night for a work-related conference that's going to run through Thursday. Luckily, both games of the Leafs-Panthers series will be happening while I'm there. That's awesome. And since I've outgrown strip clubs, casinos, and cannabis shops, I'll be taking in both games in person. I honestly thought I might be seeing a handshake line in Game 4, but that's now unlikely. However, if I do happen to see the back end of a sweep, how much impact do you think that will have on Dubas's and Keefe's current employment? I think Dubas is safe. Even if they get swept, I think. Because if they get swept, Florida will likely they'll be seen as the Bruin killers, and Toronto management will say, well, that was the team of destiny of these playoffs. If Florida gets or sweeps and then gets swept, that might change things. But I think Dubas is safe. If they get swept, I think Keefe's job might be back in question. But I don't know.
I think
they broke the first round curse.
Yeah. It might. It's loser attitude, but it might be mission accomplished for at least. That's a strong consolation prize.
Look how they cheer every goal right now. Every goal right now is for those fans is gravy.
Yeah,
there wasn't the despondent attitude or air after their game 1 loss. Like they genuinely, I've said it a million times, they feel like they're playing with house money. Fair or not, right or not, like they broke through that barrier. And for now, if they lose to the Panthers, even in horrific fashion, they'll be able to say, okay, we now have the blueprint. How do we refine, modify?
They spent a lot of emotional fuel getting through that first series. Like it's hard to regroup mentally to get ready to go for another series with a team that's as relentless as Florida has been.
It's like getting your first good night's sleep in months. You can't relate, Brad. Your first good night's sleep in months, and then you might still have a shit day after, but at least you're not.
Hey, at least I had a good sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's your take?
I hated that metaphor.
Because it was too real?
I'll sum this up. If they get swept in the second round, their jobs shouldn't be safe, but getting over that first round boogeyman probably means they are safe.
Yeah. Okay. That's all for now. We're going to be back with you on Sunday for our pre-draft lottery episode. We are doing a live stream on Sunday night before the draft lottery kicks off and through the draft lottery, so stay tuned for that. YouTube.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Follow along there as we watch what is inevitably going to be the 9th overall pick coming up for the Red Wings in the Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, Carlsson, Michkov lottery. So
Monday night.
What did I say?
Sunday.
Monday night. Monday, May 8th. 7:30 p.m. Eastern will kick off the stream, and then the lottery will be sometime around 8 p.m. unless the NHL decides to switch their schedule again, because it's the NHL and this is how we operate. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, all of you who have left us ratings and subscribe wherever you get the show. Thank you so very much. For all of our Patreon supporters, you mean the world to us, our name level supporters on Patreon. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Bertuzzi is straight up missing, Nick Perks, Icon, We Are Geelong, the greatest team of all, Glenn Brabham, Aiden White, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Misunderstood Yowie, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Babe Landeskog, Bros Before Hosas, Brian Hanna, but the B is silent, Carl Bertinen Analuski, Chimmy, Chris P., Citizen High Five, Connor Scovey, Cookin' with Kosa, Coyote Season Tickets in Tempe, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Kalen Wood, Kevin James, Marcus, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Nicholas Fritz, R.A., Red 3, Ryan Hubbard, Ryan, the Ryan Hannah, Scott Martin, That's What I Appreciates About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, number 1 Detroit Red Guys fan, A.A. Ron, Adam Gowitzka, Adam Rose, Brad Simmons, Brian Vashuk, Captain Antonio Gracias of the United Federation of Cheesebags, C.J. Wilkinson, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Dungeon Master of Puppets, Evans Shortgorm Goals, Evans 2018 Kitchener Road Puddles, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Grand Rapids Hockey Guy, Griffey Boy, Instructions Unclear, Cheesebag No Longer Fresh, James Laporte, Jeremiah Adobo, J.M. Rhapsody, John Evans, John Engels, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Matt Keeler, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Ophelia, Reed, Steven, Tatar Sauce, and the Hodag. Thank you all so very much. Get ready for draft lottery. It's almost here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.